give you all some practical tools to try to reinforce optimism or kind of that optimistic outlook on things. And so again, as always, just wanted to just shout out to all of our different families and communities, partner sites that really do help help support all of us during this time. And just also something to think about too, that I know we repeat it every session, but that especially now, just given all the other stressors going on, and also just in general that living life like a marathon is can be really helpful in terms of coping with just constant changes in the world, and thinking about ways to try to kind of live life in that marathon mindset, or even help teach others to live life in more of that marathon mindset can really be helpful, albeit tiring at times. Also, just to review with our snazzy wheel of resilience, that we've actually, think about where we started at. We started out over here at the top of the circle, ability to self-calm. We've kind of worked our way through, maybe out of order, but we're definitely, over halfway there in terms of things. And then with 2 sessions left, we're definitely going to, review some of the different strategies we talked about, as well as kind of introduce some more concepts. But the cool thing about these 10 facets of resilience is that you're not really doing one without the other. They're not meant to be practiced in silos. So for example, hope and optimism, there's a lot of overlap in skills that help one or the other. And that also can help, for example, tap into your ability to self-calm. So there's lots of overlapping facets or topics that can really help. Just because you're practicing something in one area doesn't mean you're neglecting all the other facets. It's only good stuff that's going to help. I'm sure you've probably seen this before too, but just wanted to recap that in terms of like why resilience is so important in schools, right? Is that there's evidence out there in terms, researchy stuff that helping kiddos get that growth mindset going, or thinking about things of, rather than seeing it as a challenge, or this insurmountable challenge, more like how can we be adaptive? How can we embrace the challenge and use our problem solving skills? How can we acknowledge that, maybe it's really difficult right now, and what can I do within my control to see things through? Seeing criticism as a way to grow, right, rather than something to avoid. And also just in general, that the more we can really try to, for ourselves, adopt that growth mindset, or help others adopt that growth mindset, can, it really does improve, whether it be academic achievement, or, improves coping, decreases mental health, distress. So there's lots of good stuff that can come from having more that growth mindset, or, helping people tap into their grit resource, if that makes sense. And so with that growth mindset, right, we are actually tapping into this resilience. How can we bounce back from things? And so it's not a thing to perfect, right? Because throughout our lives, I'm sure we've encountered similar situations and maybe ended up with skills that are translatable across different situations. But I feel like really each challenge is unique, and maybe we can draw on past experiences to learn how to bounce back from something. But just practicing all those different 10 facets, they're not meant to be perfected. It's meant to be kind of trial and error, try some things out. Some things might work in certain situations, some things might not. The cool thing too is that, that growth mindset and resilience, it really does tap into that social emotional curriculum that some areas and school districts do include or incorporate. Maybe you yourself incorporate in your classrooms, but really helping, modeling and helping students learn positive coping strategies, and especially right now, given there's all the stressors out there.
I appreciate what you're saying too, Stephanie, about with all these skills, it's not all or none. It's like we're all working every day to do a little bit more of each one. There's days where you're maybe less optimistic, but that doesn't mean you're zero optimistic. And there's days, today spring is kind of here, and it makes it easier, and you're kind of maybe prone to see the positive. So just just giving yourself a break that, it's practice day in, day out to have a little bit more on the optimism side and hope side and resilience side, not perfection.
Good comment. And so, in terms of trying to remind ourselves why this is also important, right? That I know when my phone doesn't charge correctly, or if I'm playing video games on it and the battery runs low, it becomes my priority to make sure it's plugged in and it's going to charge. And so, just if we were thinking about ourselves as this phone, right, that we got to make sure that we are taking time for ourselves and, finding ways to help recharge our own batteries, and not run ourselves into the ground. So in the chat box, and we want you to be honest with us. So over the past month or a little bit over a month, have you been able to practice any of the like self-care, self-replenishment, or things associated with hope, any of the skills that we've talked about? Okay. So it looks like, about half of you tried them more than once, and the other half, you just didn't have time. And I really appreciate, we definitely appreciate your honesty in terms of just sharing with us, like what that has been like. And again, right, there's going to be weeks where it's easier to try some things, there's going to be weeks where it's more difficult to try some things. So just the fact that you're thinking about it, I think that's a huge positive. Does anyone want to share either in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and wants to share with the group in terms of, was there one particular thing that you thought was really helpful, or was there anything that you struggled with? Well, yes, I definitely agree with you. Okay, looks like Roxy looked at the Calm app and tried some of the suggestions. Good job trying those things.
Yeah, I wanted to say I'm so outdoor oriented, and like Alexis, that's what I was going to point out, that during that 12 or whatever time period it was when it was just so cold and we were struggling even to keep our pipes from freezing, it's just hard to remember these things. And since last weekend, when all of a sudden it's been in the 60s, everything seems better. So finding ways, even when times are tough, to kind of focus on your resilience, I think, is the key, because sometimes it's easy, like right now, and sometimes it's hard.
Yeah. Just to echo that too, I know for myself, like I'm a very outdoorsy person, or physical activity is definitely how I kind of self-replenish. And so for me, when it was super cold, it's like, well, I can't go outside. So I found myself just kind of running in place, or like trying to do those high knees in the corner of my apartment. But it wasn't fun to do, but yeah. It's all about how to get creative, or just, kind of in those moments, be honest with yourself in terms of like, well, like it's not, maybe things aren't going to work out the exact way I wanted it to this week or this stretch of time because of, other factors. And then being able to recognize, like, okay, if I can't control the weather outside, what can I control kind of within my environment to still be able to, even just, practicing self-care, even just thinking about it. But thank you all for sharing. If you come up with other ideas or anything you want to share, feel free to just put it in the chat box. Oh, I like what Roxy wrote too. You got a different environment. Nothing wrong with changing your environment. I hope you had a good time there. Yeah. So just, kind of self-reflection, think about what comes to mind when you think of an optimist, right? What about a pessimist? And what are some reasons you might find yourself being overly pessimistic about a situation? And pessimism or having, kind of like realistic thoughts about stuff, like maybe you can have the thought of like, oh, like, things aren't working out. To me, like that's a valid thought. But when it becomes this persistent kind of coloring everything negative, that's when it starts slipping into that more pessimistic mindset.
It looks like Roxy shared really the impact of fatigue and just being tired and exhausted, and that sure can impact. I think it also needs to not be the tyranny of optimism, where, like you said, we may have some of those thoughts come through that, this isn't perfect or this is awfully cold, but not getting stuck there seems the key.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, it's like, optimism, like we'll go over in a second, it doesn't mean this, everything's butterflies, unicorns, everything's happy all the time. It's more of having that, how do you have a positive outlook despite being able to recognize like, hey, maybe this is not the best situation, maybe this is, stressful, this is frustrating, it's tiring. It's like you can still acknowledge the negative aspects about, life or a specific thing you have to do, but it's more of like, how do you kind of acknowledge that and still make progress, or like just like Evelyn said, not getting stuck in that negative mindset. So optimism means having positive expectations about the future and believing that, right? So this brings in that locus of control component, and believing that the right time, effort, and support can make these problems solvable. So it's not so much, again, right, that it's this unrealistic glass is always half full, like there's nothing wrong in the world, right? Everything's just fine. But it's having, it's being able to acknowledge maybe things that aren't so positive and still having a positive expectation about how you can potentially kind of steer your own future course. And so I wanted to include this. I think this is like I definitely thought about myself. I'm like, yeah, it is. It's a true of life, right? That despite all the negative stuff that may have happened to us, or that maybe we've seen or experienced, that are currently going through, that we still survived our worst days, right? So somehow we still found a way to persevere and still get past that really bad day. So that'd be more of that positive mindset, right? That, despite all this stuff, we're still here. Yeah, and so I like your comments too in the chat box, and thank you, Alexis, for sharing, right? That I think that's something that happens to a lot of us where, right, if we don't have other outlets or ways to try to engage us, that sometimes we can really get, whether it be more perfectionism driven or just kind of our self-talk, but that's when that pessimism can really start to spin. And so, there's also kind of this idea that I know, or maybe we all think of it this way too, but, is pessimism protective? I'm definitely someone who I tend to, like, say with whether it be the pandemic or, getting my car fixed or something where I can't directly control something. I know to myself, I always have the thought of, okay, today's a success if I get through it, or I schedule my car, or, I cope well today during the pandemic or something like that. And so having like kind of setting those expectations, or just, delineating how you're going to say, quantify whether today was a success or not, or just those kind of things, that's different from this idea that some people have in terms of like pessimism being protective, right? There's a difference between setting expectations or goal setting versus someone who might all the time kind of be stuck in that negative headspace and think more about like, well, I'm going to think about the worst of the situation, or I'm always going to just expect to be disappointed in a certain situation. And while that might feel protective in a way, there's studies out there that support that if you're just chronically pessimistic, kind of, I always think about Eeyore with like the little rain cloud over him, that individuals tend to have more depressive symptoms, tend to be, actually when they do longitudinal studies, might be more likely to die prematurely compared to individuals who have a more optimistic mindset. Something else to think about too is that, especially, I know it's true like working with little kids or just in like an office space, if you start kind of sharing those pessimistic thoughts, right? That negative headspace. Sometimes you can have what we call like co-rumination, where maybe you're spinning, right? 'Cause you're in your head thinking about these negative thoughts. And then others start saying, oh yeah, like the world is horrible. This is so bad, right? And so you kind of are egging each other on almost in this pessimistic outlook of things. And so definitely, like again, right, we can acknowledge there's lots of negative stuff, but just ever, to me, this is a really important facet, especially for kind of modeling behavior or teaching little kiddos in terms of, right, like we can acknowledge that maybe things aren't that positive right now or aren't that great. And then trying to also model that, how can we think about things from this more positive expectation outlook, such that we don't just get stuck in that negative headspace.
I think for me, it's turning off the media for a while, like just having a media holiday, even just for, a couple hours, because it's so easy to get kind of sucked into the drama of it all.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And then I thought this quote was, I know it's definitely true for me, but right, the brain is like Velcro for negative experiences, but Teflon for positive ones. If you kind of reflect back, it's like, no, there's a lot of positive things that happen to us. Maybe like something small, like success. I went to the grocery store, right? That counts. Or you talked to a friend on the phone, or you texted someone, or maybe you got an email that you were really hoping for. But for some weird reason, just the way that we are wired as humans, right, we really attend to those negative experiences and start to kind of discount the positive ones. If you think about it, like, however we ended up as being humans here, um, it, it's a it's a helpful skill to be able to try to, learn from negative experiences, right? If you're out kind of, prehistoric humans living out in the woods thinking about like, okay, saber-toothed tiger, there's a negative experience, I'm going to try to evaluate what I could do differently, that kind of stuff. But so our brain's just kind of wired to try to highlight those negative experiences because we want to learn from them, right? So we can stay alive longer. In our modern day world, it's not so helpful all the time, right? Because we might attend more to those negative emails or negative feelings, but then we're also neglecting all the positive things that may have happened too. So I know this has come up a couple times in our different ways to tackle these facets or practice them, but gratitude is something that comes up a lot. Gratitude is a really powerful kind of intervention for a lot of different things. And so, however you practice it, I think kind of the easiest way for some people is to do it more in like a self-affirmation kind of way. Put sticky notes on your computer or on your mirror. For some people, you could do it in a group or in teams, and maybe when there's a shift change or at the beginning or before a meeting, after a meeting, so when there's going to be some kind of group potentially, like a shared question that everyone could answer could be, like, what am I thankful for today? Or what did I enjoy about today? Or what did I do well or contribute today? Or what made me laugh or smile today? It doesn't have to be like a huge grandiose thing, right? It could be a small thing like so-and-so said hi to me. Like I got paperwork graded. I enjoyed the sunrise today, right? It could be smaller things. It doesn't have to be this huge goal accomplishment component to it. And so the neat thing is that just by kind of doing that type of exercise, right? Whether it be by yourself, with a partner, with the kids that you're working with, that you're also, not only for yourself, but with them, you're helping them practice kind of focusing on more of those positive things or having more of that positive outlook. Then another kind of exercise is this stop component. And so if you think about it, right, our perception really creates our reality. And so we definitely fall into this trap, right, of making assumptions or trying to predict people's feelings when we're stressed out, when maybe we somehow feel threatened, or there's always that confrontation component sometimes. And so with this exercise, so each letter of the stop sign represents something different. But so it's more like when you notice yourself to start feeling overwhelmed, maybe get kind of anxious, kind of just feeling uncomfortable, just to stop, right? So when you notice yourself feeling overwhelmed, try to remove yourself from the situation or just kind of stop what you're doing. Take some deep breaths. So the cool thing is that physiologically, you're actually calming your body down. You're switching your nervous system from more of a flight or fight to more of the rest and digest. So you're actually doing something physiologically to yourself. So you want to stop, take some deep breaths. And this is going to help you think more clearly after you kind of, you're able to disengage from that situation. O is for observe. So you want to try to observe the situation from a bird's eye view, right? Not, or like you're climbing a tree looking down the situation. So the O part is trying to remove yourself from the situation and think about it more as like a scientist. And to try to get that, right, a fuller picture of what's happening and without kind of just jumping into more of that emotional or emotion mind or just that emotional response sometimes. And then P stands for proceed. So after you have gained a broader perspective on a situation, right, from taking that more observership role, then you might be in a better headspace in terms of being able to acknowledge like, oh, like what that person said really frustrated me, or I don't understand, what they meant by that, or it puts you in a better space to not just be reactive, but to try to think logically or more like a scientist in terms of like what's going on. And so this can be really helpful with little kiddos too, right? Because a lot of times like something happens and we switch right into that emotion mind. But this can, of course, you can adjust it for the specific age group. But right, these are all skills that I think you're already teaching the kiddos, or right, that they're going to learn at some point in school. But is how to like navigate disagreements with peers, or just that kind of stuff. I don't know if Evelyn had any other examples for that.
I really like the acronym. It's easy to remember. It just reminded me of what Alexis just said about getting out of your head. Like all these seem to kind of take you from just kind of running the thoughts over and over to kind of getting outside and, doing something with your body and taking that other perspective. I love all the chat that's going on just around, how folks may use imagery like climbing that tree, or kind of how you can kind of move from just thinking and making yourself potentially more upset to kind of, switch into that observer perspective.
And I think this quote is also helpful too, right? Not only do we attend to those negative things, but also, right, what we are what we remember. So just as food becomes woven into the body, memory becomes woven into the self. So I don't know if you all watch Westworld. It's more of a sci-fi thing on TV, but one of the things that they say a lot too is that what are memories but the stories that we tell ourselves. And so just this kind of idea of, right, just like how we eat food becomes kind of part of us. That's why I want to focus on nutritious things, right? Things that can help fill us up and give us our body meaningful nutrients. So the same thing too with, memories or the stories that we tell ourselves, right? That becomes part of our identity and who we are. So I think it's just important, whether it be us or whether it be the kiddos that we're teaching, just to, right, be mindful of kind of that, if it is that negative headspace, or if it is, just having more of that optimistic versus pessimistic outlook on things, that can really color how we think about ourselves and how we remember things too. So something to think about in terms of like sometimes, right, there's some kind of emotional thing that happens, something upsets us, our emotional alarm system goes off telling us that something's not quite right. So, and it's easier said than done, right? But whenever you notice you start feeling that overwhelmed sensation, or maybe you feel like, you notice a kid's getting defensive, or you yourself are defensive in more of a situation, try to get curious. So that means, right, you want to avoid jumping to conclusions. We want to, you can even use questions, right, taking that more of an observer mode. And if you're still engaged in that situation, to start asking questions more like, oh, like, help me understand, tell me more, walk me through, right, this XYZ topic that you're talking about. Because, a lot of times, just because we're humans, right, we tend to categorize real fast and tend to think about things as either good or bad. But, like a lot of times it's just miscommunication is what's going on. And so by taking that curious approach and asking questions like, help me understand, tell me more, right, you're decreasing the speed at which you're jumping to a conclusion on either side, right? It's just more of like your information gathering. You're in that scientist observer mode. And then if there is something that, really kind of rubs you the wrong way, or you just really, like maybe you don't agree when they, offer more explanation, asking yourself sometimes like what really matters here can be helpful, right? So is there a larger value that you two can maybe, if you're disagreeing on how to handle a certain student, like is there a larger value in play that you both can collaborate over, rather than this one thing that maybe you don't disagree, that you might not agree on. So another activity is called clearing negative files. So if you think about kind of like that repetition of sometimes like negative thoughts, another way to think about it is that it's kind of your inner critic that we talked about, and that perfectionism component that can keep you stuck in the past, right? It's just your inner critic kind of talking to yourself on replay. Something to ask yourself too, right? Like, does this thought, does it keep me stuck, or is it actually moving me forward, right? Because with any kind of optimism approach, you want to be moving forward, that problem solving mindset. Again, right, we want to focus on strengths that you have to face the problem and what you can control, right? So it's all about kind of thinking about what things are within my control despite, the situation, and then focusing on those things that you feel like you could make movement in. And to think about too, right, there's miscommunications happen, just things happen. And so, to forgive doesn't mean necessarily like you're just going to completely erase maybe what was said, what happened, but to forgive actually really means that you're breaking the hold that person's behavior has on you. So again, it's like these are all things kind of within your control, and in terms of how you think about stuff, right? That perspective taking can really help clear some of those, the negative thoughts that might kind of promote that stuckness in that mindset. Yeah, and I like what Alexis just wrote in the chat in terms of, just in meetings where you're promoting that curious mindset versus just providing recommendations, right? It can really be like a team building exercise. Yeah. And so other ways too, and I think this kind of speaks exactly. It's almost like you knew my next slide, Alexis, but right, just having that group mind or the group problem solving approach, right? That it's really easy for us sometimes to walk into a meeting and say, okay, I think we need to do X, Y, Z, and then have that be it. But the more, right, you can work on a problem together, having that curious approach, that team collaboration towards a solution can be more sustainable. Overall, same thing with, even if we're talking about little kiddos in a classroom, that, right, like these are actually really just, even though we're adults, right, and we're noticing like, oh, this is really helpful when I go to meetings or in more of this like leadership position, that, it's like, this is a skill that we can actually teach to the little ones too, in terms of, of course, maybe the topic might be different, but right, just modeling that curious questioning, or that collaborative approach towards like creating, solving a problem, right? Everyone has buy-in, everyone is working together on something. Also too, throwing in, right, kind of like that, how our actions, beliefs, and perceptions, right? That can also help impact like just individuals taking responsibility for different things that have to get done too. And so, only positive stuff in terms of, right, practicing this type of problem solving with, the younger ones can be helpful. And then also, so we talked a lot about this last time too, but a lot of the same interventions in terms of how to bring hope into a classroom, and the same could be said of optimism. So using, right, that project-based learning, maybe focusing on a current event, or even kind of outlining more of that optimism mindset or that growth mindset can be helpful, in terms of like modeling how to think about things for different age groups. This is just a stressful time, right? So, even focusing on more kid-specific current events, or talking about how a specific individual, maybe that they can relate to, has made a positive impact, or kind of chose that more optimistic path. There's lots of other interventions like mindfulness, right? Again, just kind of being present in the moment. Leaves on a Stream is always a good one to go to, in terms of, right, trying to promote that, just kind of being in the moment and focusing on things that are within your control versus, all the things that are happening to us in the daily world. Again, right, kids are sponges. And so the more that we can, like, to me, catastrophizing and unproductive self-talk, it's going to happen every once in a while. And so, just being aware of, when you might be catastrophizing or might be doing your own unproductive self-talk, just thinking about, like, if we do it, other people are going to hear it, and we don't want, at least that's something that I'm definitely mindful of, is I don't want maybe like the kids that my sister works in, like, hearing my own catastrophizing or my unproductive self-talk. Doesn't mean that we're going to try to shield the world from it, but just more of, right, you don't want maybe specific age groups to pick up on that and then also start doing that themselves. And so the more that we can model that more of a positive or problem-solving self-talk, right, that could be more of a productive, just thing to be mindful of. There's also something that I found online in terms of when you Google how to teach optimism in schools, there's something called the teaching explanatory style. And I think I wrote down somewhere what psychologists came up with this, but it did not translate into my notes section. But so this style is thinking of, like, say if there's a stressor, and then trying to kind of, it's almost like sentence diagramming, but not. So say you have stressor, then kind of deciding, is it an internal, right, something that's happening within us, or is it external, something being done to us, right, in the outside? Is it like a one-time stressor, or is it this thing that's going to be persistent? Is it local or is it global? And then also, I think something that's also important to ask yourself, or in terms of like picking apart a specific situation, is your perceived control. So is it something that I actually have direct control over versus not? And then maybe it's not. How can I make it such that there is one piece of it that I could enact some kind of change on? So that's also just another method that I found online in terms of how to teach others to have more of that positive or optimistic mindset. All right. And then another quote, which I think kind of lends itself to just this discussion too, right, is that reality is always kinder than the stories we tell about it. And that really, I think, maps on to kind of that Teflon idea too, right, that we tend to, kind of focus on those negative memories or negative things that have happened, and we really do negate the positive things that happen, which is part of the way that we are wired. So you all have tons of different strategies in your toolbox of resilience. So that's kind of neat. And now you've added stop and gratitude to it too, specifically. And the cool thing about all these different things is that, right, that like grounding and breathing and naming 3 good things, scheduling activities, even though these are all from different facets that we talked about, that they all, by practicing stop or by practicing gratitude, you're practicing self-care, you're practicing self-replenishment. So again, just like we said before, that, these resilience facets don't happen in a silo, that, by working on one, you're actually working on all of them, which is really neat. And just remember to check in, right? We never want to run our phone battery down. So thinking about, right, how do we not run our own personal battery down? And so, it doesn't have to be a formal check-in, but just always, just to reiterate, it's always important to be able to check in with yourselves in terms of, are you feeling great, or are you in that pink zone, kind of where you're feeling empty, and knowing what strategies, maybe there's strategies that we've talked about, or what strategies you can use to try to replenish your own battery.
This is really with our behavioral hat and Dr. Zhang can perhaps talk more to this than I can. I think, you know, with students that we see, you know, I think we have the mindset, you know, finding the small positive reinforcement part and seeing how that goes along with kind of building optimism. So, you know, just gratitude that it's nice to see you today, like you came to school. And I think everyone on this call is a lot likely like super at that. So I think, you know, how do you do that for yourself? Like, you know, maybe it was not a nice day like today, but one of those really cold days, like, you know, what can you give yourself credit for? To me, it's kind of that accumulation of things of, you know, finding those positives through a day that kind of builds toward optimism.
Yeah. And so just kind of just to add on to what Evelyn said too, right? And then thinking about, you know, like not only for ourselves, right, with what, you know, kind of what positive things are we doing that kind of accumulate to the maybe this larger positive. And then, you know, thinking about, you know, just how important our role is, right? No pressure in terms of, right, we're working with kiddos, we're working with families, we have our own families potentially. And you know, just yeah, the more that you can try to highlight those positives, right, you're going to build positive momentum from it. So in the chat box, if you're being completely honest, do you think you're going to try any of these skills or not planning on doing it? Yay. Well, it looks like most people are going to try it at least once. So that sounds awesome. We're already doing it. Are there any specific skills that anyone has tried that we haven't talked about that you want the group to know about?
I wondered if anyone in the group had any comments about humor. I know we had that on a slide. That can always be such a tricky one, especially with kids, you know, about how it can be really powerful with ourselves and kids, but sometimes that can be misinterpreted. So I just wondered if anyone had any guidance that way.
I feel like this example may not be the perfect example, but I do feel like the humor sometimes is like, for example, dealing with challenging behaviors, and sometimes you see the behaviors is, although like, you know, at one hand you it's frustrating, but on the other hand you see like, you know, sometimes kids do things that are just like, you know, make you feel like you you can't help but laughing, although you try to not laugh like in front of the child, but still that kind of, you know, feeling that part of the humor, it's helpful to, you know, help the provider or educator to kind of calm down and then be more like positive when working with the kiddos.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Yeah, great point. That just like, I think we all got into it to have some joy with kids. So, you know, seeing the creative things, sometimes they're a little squirty, but you know, it's also the fun part. Thanks for the comment too, Roxy. Like just looking at some silly fun things, you know, that's a great example with your son's funny videos.
Sorry, the last one I got, the last chat got cut off there. I didn't finish it, but yeah, when I went to Florida, it was like, I don't really care about traveling, but I knew that, you know, it was good for me to get out of my comfort zone, go meet COVID in the face, be around all these thousands of people, you know, sit on the full airplanes, and so far I'm okay. It's kind of given me a sense of, I guess, empowerment, knowing that I was able to do all that. And also, we've been dealing with a really difficult telemed situation here the past 2 or 3 weeks. And I just had full confidence in the support that I have through KU, and I've just felt really good about the whole situation. And so far it's going well. You know, it's not perfect, but you know, it's not a disaster either. So it's just a great resource to have KU Telehealth and telemedicine behind us.
Thanks, Roxy. That's great to hear, kind of like you're saying, kind of doing the best and knowing like if we're pointing it the right direction, it's gonna likely have success. I really appreciate what you said too about like facing kind of a feared situation and keeping that story in mind too about like, you know, how you did that and how all of us do that same thing. That was really an awesome example. Thank you.
I also like the comment about mindfulness too, that, you know, just even the negative ones, right? That it's that experience or that feeling is not going to last forever. I think that's always so important to think about, you know, just with all the different stressors going on too, that, you know, it's like, again, emotions are kind of our alarm system telling us, right, when something's not quite right or something's not comfortable. And so just, you know, being able to even have that self-talk of like, you know, I might feel this way and I know it's not going to last forever is just super important. Yeah, well, definitely opening up for questions for you all, and you know, just that definitely, you know, any kind of apps that you all find, we want to hear about it because I'm sure everyone else in the group wants to know about it. I'm glad that you all have been able to check out like the Calm app, or there's even like this Noizio, Noizo, which is more of, you can create your own mix of white sound noises. And there's definitely lots of other COVID resources out there too on our Telehealth Rocks website, which you probably already have navigated through. So any questions that we can help answer, or any comments that you want to bring up? Oh, let me type it out. I think that's the app. There's like a, you can create your own mix of like forest, rain sounds, all that kind of stuff. And it's a free app too.
Well, we hope folks keep in touch over the next month if we can put our heads together, or if you have suggestions, we'd love to share them with this group.